Oh god. Now I remember everything.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
I'm not even supposed to be here today! Oh, fuck you!
Come on, you want me to drive? You're supposed to be suicidal. Remember, I'll
Anybody
drive.
a drive?
Get in the car.
Fuck me in the ass. Fuck you, you fucking stupid cunt.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here. Sorry about all the noise. There's yard people working in the yard, but anyway, despite that, I am here with a brand new movie review, and this movie review is going to be for the final entry of the Hobbit trilogy, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies. Yeah, that film. So what's the plot of this movie? Well, so after the dragon Smaug left the lowly mountain, the people of Lake Town see a threat coming. Orcs. Dwarves, elves, and people are now having to prepare for war. Bilbo sees Thorin going mad and tries to help, and meanwhile Gandalf gets rescued from the Necromancer's prison, and his rescuers realize who the Necromancer is. The evil Dark Lord Sauron. So, yeah, as you all know how it got made, The Hobbit had originally been planned as a two-part film, but then Warner Brothers decided clearly wanted it to be a three-movie story, so they confirmed that on July 30th, 2012, it would be 3 movies to be turned to a trilogy. And apparently the third film was going to contain the Battle of Five Armies and make extensive use of that pretenses that Tolkien wrote to expand the story of Middle-earth. Jackson stated that the third film would make use of footage originally shot for the first and second films. It would require additional filming as well. Originally, it was going to be titled There and Back Again in August 2012, but then, of course, the title got changed to Battle of the Five Armies because he thought the new title better suited the situation of the film. And Jackson stated he adapted the Hobbit as a two-part film, but the original title may have felt right for the second part, which would have included both Bilbo's arrival and Erebor departure, but then the decision to adapt the novel as a 3-part film, it kind of felt misplaced because Bilbo had already arrived there in the second part, so yeah. But anyway, after The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies was shot and marketed, it would go on to premiere in London on December 1st, 2014, and then it got released in New Zealand on December 11th, 2014, and then released to the United States on December 17th, 2014, by Warner Bros. Pictures. And this movie's reception was mixed. But it made over $962 million worldwide at the box office. It wasn't so keen in North America, though. But despite the North America gross, it became the second highest grossing film of 2014. And of course, it got nominated for Best Sound Editing at the 87th Academy Awards. Now, as for my reaction. So, as you all know, loved Unexpected Journey. Then, saw Desolation of Smaug. Loved some stuff of it, but I thought of it was eh. I was hoping the next film would be better because this was going to lead us into Lord of the Rings and how that all starts, how Sauron's new eye formed and stuff, how, yeah, you know, that is going to lead into all of that. Sadly, when I saw this film in theaters in IMAX 3D on Boxing Day 10 years ago, back when this movie came out, it sadly was not any better. In fact, this will piss many people off, but I think this easily to me is the worst Middle-earth film of Peter Jackson's version of Middle-earth. I mean, granted, it's better than the Amazon Prime series, no doubt, but this movie's still not... This movie I just still think is not very good. Just still not a fan of this movie. This one really, it just felt like a bunch of CGI, green screen, and it kind of feels more like a 2-hour padded out final scene of what was supposed to be just a 2-parter story. And this, sadly, like, this just ended the first story of Middle-earth on a bit of a whimper. Yeah, the Lord of the Rings setups were good, but the rest of the story, though, the actual, like, whole Hobbit, like, the War for the Mountain story, like, that's the stuff that was just not that great. The acting was still good, though. The cast of this trilogy was great. They did the best they could with some of the awful script Warner Brothers clearly gave them. It's like, right there, but the character development was kind of rushed because, like, you have so many characters. You got the Lake Town, you got this Polar Express animated Billy Connolly character that's Thorin's cousin entered in there. You got the dwarf crew you have been following since that unexpected journey in Bilbo in there. You have Gandalf in there, all thrown into this. And you have more dull scenes of Tauriel falling in love with Killy. Like, after they literally just falling in love with him after this conversation. Like, and like, it's just the subplot. That's pretty much the worst subplot of this trilogy. I do not like. But, like, the stuff that's, like, really the bad stuff, like, it's the badly done CGI, the lack of character development because you have too many characters that you didn't even see much of in Unexpected Journey. Yeah, like, the Lake Town people you saw in Desolation of Smog, the dwarf crew, the whole gang of dwarves, the main characters you've been following since Unexpected Journey, and now you throw in this other dwarf army that you never let. You only saw in, like, flashbacks. You didn't see Billy Connolly's character in the flashbacks either. But this dwarf army just shows up and the elves try to bargain with Thorin and his crew. They just magically then show up and they start their war. Or you have to focus on badly written characters like Tauriel here, who wasn't even needed in this trilogy at all. In fact, it kind of felt like the characters you don't care much about have more screen time than the characters in the book. Like, Dorn gets like 15 seconds. Most of, like, the dwarf crew, except for, like, Thorin, don't really get much of a line. And a lot of things don't really get explained much either. So yeah, this honestly, like, was hoping this would be the best of the three. Sadly, this was the worst of the three. Like, it stretches out the source material more, has way too much CGI. It's got the most action, but the action scenes aren't even that interesting. It shoves the whole message, greed is bad, like, over a bunch in, like, a buck of scenes. Yeah, that's the whole point of the book. That happens in the book too, but the book didn't throw that message in your face multiple times. Like, this was like a whole trilogy that was just adapted into a trilogy because we needed to be cashed in on Lord of the Rings, but even though this was a book that was not even that long, it was smaller than Lord of the Rings, which had a reason to be a trilogy, because that's 3 books, and those books were long. Right there. But yeah, how does this movie start? Well, we start off right where that cliffhanger of the Desolation of Smog abruptly left us, where Bilbo and the dwarves are watching from the lowly mountain. Smog sets Lake Town on fire. Bard gets out of prison by pretty much tying his rope around the cowardly lake master that's trying to escape with the gold, save his own ass, not save any of the people. He pretty much breaks out of prison with aid from his son. He kills Smog with the black arrow. So, like, yeah, like, that is how, I knew that was how the movie was going to start, like, back when they were promoting this film, and back when I first saw Desolation of Smog, all the way back in 2013. I knew that was going to be the start of the film. Smog was going to die in the first minute, so the cliffhanger wasn't really all that chilling to me, because I knew how this movie was going to start off. So Smog's falling body then crushes the fleeing master of Lake Town and his cronies. Bard then becomes a new leader of Lake Town, and so he guides the people to seek refuge in the ruins of Dale. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Thorin is now possessing the vast treasure in the mountain, and he's searching obsessively for the Arkenstone, which Bilbo had found in the last movie, but he keeps hidden. And upon hearing that Lake Town survivors have fled to Dale, he immediately orders the entrance to the Lowly Mountain sealed off, and pretty much, kind of goes back on his word on sharing the gold with the townspeople. So Battle of the Five Armies is like the most inconsistent film of Middle-earth. It's got the collateral decapitations happens a few times. Like, the extended cut does have some good gore. There's There's this, yeah, this CGI Polar Express animated dwarf that literally just makes the fight scenes too comical when he crushes them with a hammer. They're stopping and they're having conversations in the middle of fights. Like, these things happen, like, the same battle, like, where several survivors of Lake Town are mercilessly killed by some hideous orcs, led by our lame villain Azog, who honestly was a lame villain in these movies. They're, like, just not that great of a villain. It's like the tonal inconsistency gets kind of worse because you have all the video game CGI that gets used for the battle. Like, like apparently, like nowadays, like it's now like harder to make like props when you have like less prep time because like, okay, the Lord of the Rings, the CGI was hidden very well. That actually had effort in the CGI, and that had more practical effects. Right there, like you could tell they had a plan, and clearly they knew what they were doing when they were making that trilogy. Here, it's like they're just trying to get it done in time for the Christmas release. And it just comes off feeling like you're just watching a video game cutscene. A lot of scenes, like the scenes with the fog. The scenes like with the fog and the sun kind of shining in the sky. They literally make that all feel like you're looking at some kind of green screen video game there. And Thor's development is kind of rushed. Because then again, this is a trilogy that just got forced to be a trilogy, even though it's based off a not even that long book. The scene with Bilbo shows that acorn and says he's going to plant that when he gets back to the Shire, that's a well done moment. And sadly, they don't give us more of that. The other dwarves like Balin, Philly, Kiffy, Biffer, Bofer, Bomber, they don't get much screen time either. There's some nice moments with Bofer on the wall, and one with Dwalin confronting Thorin. Then they go out into battle, and surviving some loads of like violence and loads of war action. But a fair amount, like what we kind of wish we saw more of, that gets sidelined. It even gets sidelined for that like Tariel subplot that I don't like either. I mean, seriously, like during like important moments of the book, in Thorin's death scene, like after Thorin dies and Bilbo mourns him, they just magically cut away to after Killy had died. And Tariel's mourning over Killy. I'll get to that stuff later. Like, and there's apparently a lot of gravity to find the stuff for Legolas, who once again should not have been in this trilogy at all. And the decent side plot about Golder ends with this all-star battle. And the CGI becomes more and more obvious, and the action becomes more and more lacking here. And like, it just feels like it's just kind of hard for me to really enjoy here, and like, because some of the action scenes just feel too ridiculous. Yeah, like Legolas keeps defying laws of physics and stuff like, that happened in Lord of the Rings. Except that's the thing though, the Lord of the Rings, the action scenes were earned and they felt epic. Right here, there were stakes had in Lord of the Rings. Here, there's not much stakes in this. Right here, like, I was really expecting this to be the grand send-off to this trilogy, like, be this little perfect idea, but this really does not even feel much like a movie, and it shows that this should just not have been a trilogy to begin with, and should have just been a two-parter the way it should have been. The experience just felt tiresome. I mean, I'm not like the reason why I'm not like raging and why I'm not calling this a rant is because this film is better than the Amazon Prime series, which is worse. This is just disappointing. It's just disappointing bad. It's not like a rage bad. Just disappointing. So, we get back to Gandalf, who's been imprisoned. Galadriel, Elrond, and Saruman arrive at Dol Guldur, and they free Gandalf. They send him to safety with Radagast, and they battle and defeat the Nazgul. And they face the formless Sauron. Galadriel banishes him and his forces, and says that he's pretty much going to go to the east, and then Saruman tells them, "Leave Sauron to me," and And I really like this. And I definitely, that's also a scene I did really like in the film. We were in like, sorry, I'm trying to come up with, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to come up with something, but, and like, it's definitely like that we got to see one last scene of Saruman, and one last scene of Christopher Lee do one last scene of the character before the next year when he would sadly pass on. And even Christopher Lee liked filming this scene because he got to show that Sauron was not always a bad guy. He got corrupted by the power of Sauron here. And after he says, "Leave Sauron to me," that's pretty much, you can clearly tell that that's pretty much how he became kind of the sadly tragic villain he ended up becoming in the Lord of the Rings movies. Right there, because Sauron clearly corrupted him after he told them to leave so he could deal with Sauron himself. Right there, because like originally, like the theatrical cuts when Sauron's death scene got cut out of Lord of the Rings, and he was unhappy about that. He had resolved him and Jackson had resolved that conflict after they got to do this scene. So it's nice we actually got to see a little more Saruman in these movies. So anyway, Azog, who's marching on Erebor with the Orc army, he sends Bullock to Mount Gunabad to summon their second army. Legolas and Tauriel witness the march of Bullock's army and is bolstered by orc berserkers and giant bats. And then, of course, we get to our elves. Thranduil and the elf army. They show up at Dale. They want to reclaim the treasure that got withheld from them by the Dwarf King Thor. But Bard asks Thorin for the share of gold that was promised to the people of the Lake Town. But Thorin doesn't want to do that and prefers war. Over peace. Then Gandalf arrives at Dale to warn Bard and Thranduil of Azog's army, but Thranduil dismisses it. Then Bilbo, though, who had found that Arkenstone, as we all remember, he sneaks the Arkenstone out of Erebor and he gives it to Thranduil and Bard so they can trade it for the promised treasures and prevent a war from happening. So when Thranduil and Bard offer the trade, Thorin, though, refuses the proposal, and Bilbo chides him for letting greed cloud his judgments, and Thorin is mad that Bilbo gave up the Arkenstone, and he nearly kills Bilbo, but Gandalf stops him. And so the dwarves help Bilbo escape. Then, of course, Thorin's cousin Dine, aka our Robert Zemeckis motion capture character played by Billy Connolly in a goofy role, arrives with his dwarf army. And a battle of dwarves against elves and men in shoes until Azog's army arrives. Like I kid you not, Dine, Billy Connolly's character, literally doesn't look much like a dwarf. This character literally looks like a motion capture character. Like, even the facial expressions, the armor he's wearing, the hammer he has, just feels like a character that came out of Beowulf. Right there. Somebody tell me you're supposed to look like that. Fine, but even if that's true, at least put some effort if you're going to make this character CGI, not look like a character from the Polar Express. So anyway, the forces of Dine, Thranduil, and Bard, along with Gandalf and Bilbo, they band together against the orcs, and a second front gets opened when the orcs attack Dale, and so Bard has to withdraw his forces to defend the city, but the viewer kind of just gets reminded every minute that they're just watching CGI armies, because you could tell the filmmakers did not care much to put any lifelike or individual characteristics on the army's apparels or movements. The creatures just look copy and paste. That is except for all the Lord of the Rings setups and the Shire-based ending. You don't really get the feeling that you really saw a lot of these New Zealand locations. Most locations are clearly just CGI made with green screen and mediocre textures, like the battlefield or that blurry floor Thorin imagines himself being sucked into, like the Mario Kart Double Dash quicksand in the dry ruins level, where like in Mario Kart General, where the player accidentally drives their racer into the quicksand and then they fall and the monster eats them. Kind of feels like that. The latter is just an example of how the movie just goes the simplest way. It's because the CGI, the camera has to stay too far from the happenings many times, and the movie doesn't really get much close to character story-wise too. Like, gone are those beloved moments of the Lord of the Rings movies where, yeah, there was a lot of characters in that trilogy, except the difference was you got to spend some actual time with them to connect to them more. Stuff like, after Fellowship of the Ring, where they had to split up, because Frodo feared that ring would keep corrupting him if he stayed with them, Two Towers Return of the King, they got better development. Right there. As their film progressed. And where even like the cameo soldiers in that trilogy, you could root for them. Here though, they're just thrown in to have a fight. So it doesn't really feel that impactful. And the few dialogue is just kind of simplistic, and characters going with exposition, where as the Lord of the Rings, you got memorable lines from Aragorn, you got memorable lines from Gandalf, you got memorable lines from the Hobbits. Even the most beloved characters that come back from those movies, except for Saruman and Galadriel, those guys, like those two had good moments for the one scene they had. It's characters like Legolas who get reduced to name dropping and stating obvious, or in a movie that's pretty much clearly rushed with the graphics and solving the storylines. It's clearly spent more on unimportant plot like the useless story about Alfred, or the useless romance with Killy and Tariel that doesn't really go much anywhere else, or the that Major's Lake Town Weasel, who pretty much just gets betrayed by a Lake Master and refuses to redeem himself at all. The Hobbit auction that actually does happen in the book. It doesn't really fit the mood or remind the audience about how nice the Hobbit story was. The Hobbit story was when they first read it. And it's and some of the heavier emotional moments of the book, they got milked for all their worth. Like, some potentially epic moments just come and they go with minimal attention. That's just really disappointing. The film just kind of feels cluttered because it has too many story elements, too many characters trying to weasel in their screen time, just too many stories wanting to be told. And honestly, I just found myself more interested around the time when the dwarf crew actually joins the fight finally, more than the main plot. The Castle War just comes across nicely, but it's not really enough to convince me. It's like where the sad ending is really deliberate, would be really all that deliberate. Another plot element that does draw attention to itself in a bad way was kind of the sense of time. Like where Jackson and the crew would excel at taking Tolkien's extended timeline, compressing it to this flowing film where everything happens in close proximity, the Battle of Five Armies doesn't really try to do this at all. Like, there's so many other plot lines they have, like, how in the world did the orcs get these giant worms that got them to the battlefield? That was not in the book. That didn't happen in the book at all. In the book, the orcs just show up and start attacking everyone. And so it adds a plot hole to Lord of the Rings. Like, if the orcs were able to get the worms in there, why didn't they have the worms in the Two Towers or Return of the King? Why didn't they just do that? Or use them to dig through the Lonely Mountain? It kind of makes no sense to me. Nobody asked for the romance subplots because it was not relevant to the story at all. Like, when I watched this trilogy, upside down again. When I watch this trilogy, I'm not watching a romance subplot. Like, I want to watch Bilbo and the dwarves. Not a romance subplot just added for cheap emotions. So, once they're inside Erebor, Thorin is suffering hallucinations of being swallowed up by gold like Mario Kart Double Dash. Before he regains his sanity, realizes his greed and selfishness, throws away his crown, and goes to his dwarf company. Will you all join me one last time in battle, is what he says, to aid him in joining the battle. And so, him and the dwarf crew, they all go into battle. He rides with Dwalin, Philly, and Killy to Ravenhill to go kill Azog. Meanwhile, Tariel and Legolas, they warn the dwarves of Bullock's arrival and Bilbo volunteers that he'll relay the news to Thorin, using that ring he found in Unexpected Journey in Gollum's cave to move through the combat unseen. And that ring's going to turn out to not lead to some good stuff. So meanwhile, during the finale, Azog kills Philly as Bilbo and the other dwarves are forced to watch. Bolg then overpowers Tauriel and then kills Killy, who had come to her aid. Whatever, at least that romance subplot is done. Legolas battles Bolg and then kills him. Then the Great Eagles arrive, and Radagast and Born and the orcs are all defeated. This is pretty much the whole finale, because like this whole film, yeah, it's 2 hours long, but you might as well just kind of really call this a 2-hour final scene of the second film. Like, you didn't need all this filler. You could have just combined this whole final battle into the Desolation of Smaug. You could have just made this and Desolation one movie. Like, or hell, you could have just made this whole... You didn't need all this filler to begin with. You could have just made The Hobbit one movie, because it's just one book. It's not even that long of a book. If you really wanted to stretch out some stuff, and just a 2-parter would have been fine. Right there, because this is really just a 2-hour long final scene. But in the whole climax, like, Thorin then fights Azog in a duel. Azog, like, and this whole fight, like, it kind of states the obvious, because I know how the book goes. It's on, like, thin ice, and he traps Azog underwater. Azog falls unconscious in the water, but then wakes up, stabs Thorin in the foot, regains the upper hand, and then, of course, like, and how it should have ended, it kind of even shows that this whole fight could have been easily dealt with in minutes, but anyway, Azog fatally wounds Thorin, but then Thor manages to press this, like, stab sword that's into him, right into Azog, and then kills Azog. But Thorin's still fatally wounded. Bilbo, who had been knocked unconscious for the rest of this whole final fight, so that just kind of really takes away much of the emotional narrative right there. But after Bilbo regains consciousness, he finds Thorin dying. He makes peace with him as Thorin dies. Then Tauriel mourns Killy, even though she only knew him for a day. Thranduil then advises Legolas, in a little bit overly too obvious Lord of the Rings setup. Like, you already had quite a few other better Lord of the Rings setups in this movie. This was the one Lord of the Rings setup that was really not that great. He advises Legolas to seek out a ranger in the north that goes by the name Strider, who is Aragorn. Who y'all know is Aragorn. And that's what I don't like, because, like I've already said bucks of times, Legolas was not even in the book. It's just added in. It's just added in because he's a fan favorite. And it kind of makes a little bit weird of a plot. It just kind of makes a bit of a plot hole here, because this is set 60 years before Lord of the Rings, not right before it. And during this whole sequence, I did like Richard and Martin's performances and Thorin's death scene right here, especially, and it's definitely a bit of a sad moment when Bilbo then realizes Thorin is dead and then breaks down as the eagles are flying over them. There, and he's like telling him that the eagles are arrived, but he sees that Thorin's died, and like Thorin tells him to go back home, watch his trees grow, makes peace with them over their little scuffle earlier. I love that scene in the movie, but sadly though, like the emotional impact the scene could have had, it abruptly cuts away to Tauriel. Yeah, just randomly just cuts away to Tauriel after you get like a few seconds of Bilbo mourning over Thorin. Right there, so that just ruins what could have been an emotional moment. It gets ruined by Tauriel's mourning of an elf character she hardly damn knew for like a day or two. And And of course, the Elf King literally tells her, when she asks why it hurts so much, because it was real. And when I saw this part in IMAX 3D Boxing Day 2014, 10 years ago, this was my reaction. Yep. There's Warner Brothers people trying to force us a bunch of motions for a subplot that barely has relevance to a story, and for characters that barely have much of a connection to one another. Yeah. Like, this is... When we're watching The Hobbit turn into a story, this isn't a subplot we want. I never liked this subplot. It was not needed at all. And now, yeah, I know in the extended version there's actually funerals for Thorin, Philly, and Killy, but the theatrical cut, there is none. Like, the funeral in this movie, why did that have to be cut out of the theatrical cut? That should have stayed. That should have stayed in the movie. And it adds another semi-plot hole, because Thorin is burying the mountain, the Arkenstone on his chest, like, in the theatrical version, it looks like it vanished. Like, he got buried with the Arkenstone in the book. It's like, who's now going to be the king? And what happens, like, that Bardadale, or is it going to be Bardadale or Thorin's cousin? Like, what are the rest of the Dwarf Company going to do? They never touch up on that much in this version of the story. Now, guys, I want to clarify, like, these reviews are for the theatrical movies. They're not for the extended cuts. Like, the funeral does happen in the extended cuts. That I do know, and like, the greedy Lake Master's, the coward Lake Master's cowardly accomplice does die in the extended cut. And in the extended cut, there's some good gore during the orc deaths. Like, when you have this trilogy, like, the one who should have been the focus of this trilogy was Bilbo. Instead of these movies, like, Bilbo just ends up being a sideshow. When he's on the screen, you're actually interested. Like, when you're watching this trilogy, I don't care for, like, Bard and his family. I don't care about the Lake Town residents. Like, I don't care about the romance with Tauriel and Killy. Like, none of that stuff generates any emotional resonance. Like, when you watch this trilogy, like, you're supposed to watch, like, Bilbo. Like, the serious parts about greed, they don't hold much weight because you're just not invested too much in most of these characters. Because of how they're written. Like, and the visuals are not that great as they were in the other two. Because of all the overfilled CGI, especially when the fog blows during, like, Thorin and Azog's fight, so it's kind of hard to see what's going on. The movie just looks too much like a video game, and the way Peter Jackson, or the Warner Bros. Executives have Peter Jackson swirl and twirl the camera, just highlights the fakeness of it all. The whole thing just breaks down in scenes where Thranduil gets 4 orcs trapped on his elk's antlers, and it beheads, or when Legolas runs up a set of boulders that are dropping through in the air. And it's kind of weird how in the world he doesn't fall off any of them when they're rolling. Makes almost no sense at all whatsoever. This whole final battle felt so much kind of a bit like a cartoon. The Battle of the Black Gate or Return of the King. Alright. That didn't feel like a cartoon. That felt like a real battle. That felt like a battle where the stakes were high because they're right near Sauron. They're right near Mount Doom. They're trying to distract Sauron from Frodo so Frodo can destroy the ring. And at first, like, Frodo falls to the Sakuma of the ring. And that freaked Sauron out. So the stakes were much more terrifying because Sauron now realized where the ring was. And immediately sent the Nazgul to go retrieve it and kill Frodo. And make sure that ring did not get destroyed. Anytime somebody tries to destroy the ring, they immediately succumb to it. The ring does anything it can to prevent itself from getting destroyed. The only reason they won is because Gollum had lived and bit off Frodo's finger. Had he not gotten to Mount Doom, Sauron would have fucking won and killed everybody. Right there. Gollum's kind of the one reason they won. And Sauron got defeated. That was not supposed to be intentional, but it's a good thing Gollum showed up and attacked both Sam and Frodo in that moment. Right there. And like here, they're just battling over a mountain. A mountain of gold. But, so yeah, now we get on to how the movie ends. Thorin's crew, they just settle into Erebor. Bilbo bids farewell to the company's remaining members, and he goes home to the Shire with Gandalf. And this is where you get the Lord of the Rings setups. And I did like the ending of this movie. Because where the two are parting ways, Gandalf admits like he actually knows of Bilbo's ring and warns him of that ring. He knows what, because like Gandalf knows that a new war is about to happen over that ring. He warns Bilbo that that ring will really do some bad luck to him if he's not careful. But Bilbo lies that he lost the ring, which he did not. He still has it in his pocket, but he clearly knows he has to lie about that ring. He's now kind of starting to realize what that ring's about to do. So Bilbo goes back to bed again, but he finds his belongings being auctioned off by the Bagginses because they thought he was dead. He stops the sale, and he tidies up his home, and reveals he still possesses the ring. Then we get back to 60 years later, during the time the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. Whereas the last time we saw Ian Holm Bilbo, we see him again. The last time we saw him was Unexpected Journey at the very start, whereas the him and Frodo's one scene. By this time, Frodo had saw Gandalf. We had the "You're late, Gandalf" scene right there, and like Gandalf returning to the Shire. And by then, Gandalf has now gotten to Bilbo's house, and we literally see the reunion scene of Fellowship of the Ring. Except this time around, it is shot from Bilbo's perspective, from inside the house. He's still looking at that ring 60 years later. And of course, you get that funny Bilbo line when Gandalf arrives at his door. No, we do not want any more visitors, wishers, or welfers. And then of course, Gandalf replies from the door, and what about very old friends? And you see Bilbo smile knowing who it is. And immediately he goes to greet Gandalf, like how the Fellowship of the Ring scene goes. And so after that, right there, guys, begins the Fellowship of the Ring. This is all on his 111th birthday that kicks off the Fellowship of the Ring. But by the time the credits have rolled, the Fellowship of the Ring has the Lord of the Rings trilogy officially starts. Right from there. Like that right there was the scene I liked in the film. As much as I didn't like this movie, I loved the ending. It was nice to see this setting up a Fellowship of the Ring. It's nice and now also kind of sad to see Ian Holm one last time because this was kind of the last movie Ian Holm filmed. And then he sadly passed on. And then sadly in 2020 he had passed on. And it's like nice to see Ian Holm redo the scene where he sees Gandalf again at the very part, knocks on Bilbo's door, and now we're going to see it from Bilbo's perspective. And then we get an end credit similar to the credits of Return of the King. But sadly, though, despite a great ending to the movie, and a great scene with Saruman and Galadriel, and some good performances from Martin Freeman, Ian McKellen, and Richard Armitage, that sadly, though, is how what sadly turned out to be, and what should not have been, a bad movie ends. I still dislike the movie, guys. It's not as bad as the Prime show. But it's still just a lazily rushed finale because they just wanted 3 movies. And this shows that this really should have just stayed a 2-parter. Hell, or just one film in general, because this book is pretty short. It's not even that long of a book. Now, is there good qualities? Yeah. The performances, the scene with Galadriel and Saruman fighting Sauron was great. And the opening performance from Smaug the Dragon, despite the fact that he predictably gets killed off in the very beginning of the movie. And the death scene of Thorne is pretty well acted between Martin Freeman and Richard Armitage, even though it kind of gets ruined by that cheap morning of Tariel. And the extended edition, I will admit, does fix some errors of the theatrical cut. The extended edition is a minor improvement. And the ending scene with Ian Holm was a terrific ending. But other than those, the Battle of the Five Armies, it's just a bad finale. Not one of the worst, but still a bad finale, especially for a Jackson Middle-earth film. Yeah, chronologically, technically it's only the third entry, and Lord of the Rings comes right after, but... So, if you do want to know how this whole story ends, trust me guys, you're better off just reading the last half of the book, or just making your own version on a stack of papers, as to how you think this whole movie's finale would go. So in the end, guys, I would just avoid Battle of Five Armies because you're just going to get a 2-hour padded out final scene of the second film that was only made into a third film to cash in on Lord of the Rings. So just go read the last half of the book and then turn the actual movie on when you get to Bilbo returning to the Shire. Anyways, guys, that's it for my review of Battle of the Five Armies. And for any Hungary Battle of the Five Armies, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are keen on seeing how the movie version ends, trust me, you're better off just reading the final half of the book, or just going to get a stack of papers and writing down your version of this movie, how you would have did this movie, right up until that scene of Bilbo returning home, because all you get here is 2 hours of a padded one scene and an overabundance of green screen and video game CGI that barely looked that good. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank the Battle of the Five Armies, I'm going to give the Battle of the Five Armies a 4 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. Well, there we go. We just finished the Hobbit movies. We finally reviewed the Hobbits. And now we've reviewed all 6 of the Peter Jackson Middle-earth films. There we go. Peter Jackson's Middle-earth is now complete. Now I want to know in the comments down below what you guys saw of the Battle of Five Armies, whether you're one of the few rare people like me who did not like this movie, or whether you're one of the majority that did like this movie. So if you say it nicely, though, tell me in the comments down below. And until then, guys, that will be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.